What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. We come to you guys tonight after the Cavs' 124-101 win over the most recent NBA Cup champion, Milwaukee Bucks. And Chris, this game was not close for a majority of it. The Milwaukee Bucks had a 1-point lead for 89 seconds of this game, and the remaining was led by the Cleveland Cavaliers. There were no ties, just two lead changes. And obviously, this is a game where both teams had a lot of different things going on. The Milwaukee Bucks were without Damian Lillard, but they did get Chris Middleton back. The Cavs were without Isaac Okoro, but they did get Max Strus back. Walk me through what you took away from this one when it comes to how the Cavs were able to adjust to what they had and what they didn't.
Three things stand out to me about this one, Ethan. The first thing is this was very, very predictable from Milwaukee's standpoint. Not only that they didn't have Damian Lillard, they didn't have a point guard. They didn't have anybody to organize their offense. They didn't have anybody to get them into their sets. They didn't have anybody to take the ball out of Giannis's hands and create for him. He was trying to create for himself, and it's very difficult to do that against the Cavs defense, especially Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen, Dean Wade in the starting lineup. With all the eyes on Giannis, it was very difficult on him, especially because the Cavs didn't really care about the other guys that were on the floor with him. They left Andre Jackson Jr. open repeatedly, and they didn't have any fear of that hurting them. They left A.J. Green open at various points. It was a game plan that was try to bother Giannis as much as possible, try and keep him out of the paint as much as possible, try and make things as difficult on him as possible by sending multiple defenders in his direction, building a wall around the paint. And Milwaukee just didn't have enough firepower without Damian Lillard. They didn't have enough ball handling without Damian Lillard. They didn't have enough organization without Damian Lillard. And the other thing is they're coming off a very emotional win. You can sit here and you could say, does the NBA Cup matter? How much does it matter? The last two MVPs, the first two MVPs of the NBA Cup are LeBron James and Giannis. The last two teams to win the NBA Cup are the Lakers and the Bucks. So those games mattered more than regular season games. The intensity was different. The physicality was different. The care level from these players, that was different. And there was going to be an emotional letdown coming from Milwaukee after winning the NBA Cup, after expending the energy that they did to win the NBA Cup, after putting so much attention and focus on winning the NBA Cup. There was always going to be an emotional letdown against the Cavs, and that played itself out. The second thing is I think you saw the impact that Max can have. You saw the spacing, you saw the shooting, you saw the gravity, you saw a bit of the two-man game between him and Evan Mobley, just the different ways that he can elevate this team, the tenacity, the competitiveness, the energy, all of that stuff that he brings to the table. And the third thing, and I just kept thinking throughout the course of this game, I have no idea how Kenny Atkinson's going to do this. I have no idea how he's going to do this, and I don't know how he's going to keep everybody happy. Tonight was a night where Max was on a minute restriction, 20 minutes. Isaac Okoro was not available, and he had a hard time finding minutes for Ty Jerome. Think about that. Ty Jerome, somebody who has been so important to the start of this season, somebody who's been so important to the success that the Cavs have had with the second unit. Another ball handler, a three-point shooter, a scoring spark plug off the bench. Ty is 50, 40, 90 right now in terms of his percentages. And they're going to have a hard time finding him minutes on a night that Isaac Okoro wasn't there, on a night that Max Strus was still on a minute restriction. He played 6.5 minutes in the first half. And the only time that he came into the game, the first time that he came into the game, was when Max needed to come out because he had hit the 10-minute threshold for the first half. Georges Niang played 17 minutes. And you could sit here and you could say it was a blowout and the game was out of hand and Tristan Thompson, Jalen Tyson, and Craig Porter Jr. got in for mop-up duty in the fourth quarter and that took some of those minutes away. Okay, sure. But when the game was still being decided, when it was still competitive, Sam Merrill had minimal opportunities to play, and Ty Jerome, like I said, played 6.5 minutes in the first half. So this is a tough decision that's coming for Kenny Atkinson. If they get to a full 11, every time it seems like they've gotten to 11 or they were going to get to 11, fate has intervened and something has happened. So I guess we have to cross that bridge when we get there. But when it is 11, I don't know how he's going to do this. I do not envy the upcoming decision that he has.
Right. And I think it was apparent not only by the decisions that he was making behind the scenes, but then it also kind of showed itself in Ty Jerome when he got on the floor. He was like, let me give you a reminder as to
Yeah.
why I should be on the floor. The first three that he got, he ran to his wing spot that he favors so much, and Donovan was still bringing the ball up, and Ty is throwing his hands in the air like, please give me the ball. I don't know how many shots I'm going to get tonight. And everybody in the arena was like, well, if you're going to cry for the ball like that, you better knock it down. He did. And then the Bucks ultimately had to call a timeout and set that up again. And then the next shot that he hit caused the same effect. So I think it's interesting when you talk about how he's been able to impact the game. I mean, MVP of September, Kobe Altman said. Arguably MVP of November, we could say, right? And how he's been able to impact everything that they've done to this point in the season doesn't go unnoticed. But what he does is comparable to a lot of the other players that also have other skills that can help the Cavs in a bigger capacity. And then when you talk about the other biggest thing that I noticed, Chris, you gave your three takeaways. My big one is Dean Wade, right? Him being able to impact both ends of the floor. And Kenny Atkinson said it after the game. When he's playing that well on both ends, which means always doing what he does on the defensive end, and on top of that, hitting shots, they're unstoppable. Not my words, Kenny Atkinson's words. And he had to kind of stop himself when having that conversation post game and was like, "Can I say that?" And I think it's just it speaks to how many options the Cavs have, not only at the small forward position, but at the power forward position and all those different things because of how interchangeable they are throughout this rotation. But I agree with you, Chris. It is going to be a difficult decision and one that we're going to have to see play out if the Cavs can get to 11 players.
The Cavs are now 10-1 with Dean Wade in the starting lineup, and he just gives them a different look, especially on the defensive end of the floor. You're talking about 6'10" Dean Wade surrounded by near 7-footers in Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. You're talking about a guy who can guard 1 through 5 in Dean. You're talking about an ability to switch everything more seamlessly and a little bit easier, keeping that level of size on the floor, the rebounding that he brings to the table. Offensively, he's a low touch, low volume kind of guy. So he's either going to shoot, he's going to pass, or he's going to try and just dribble a couple of times and create something. It's an interesting conundrum because, Max is going to start at some point. So, what does that mean for Dean? He's going to be looked at as the small forward, the backup small forward. Well, okay, that's fine. But what about Karis LeVert? What about Sam Merrill? What about Isaac Okoro? I mean, it's just hard to fit all of these guys in. I talked to Dean after the game about it, and he knows that there is a potential, even though he has started this many games, even though he's been so important to the Cavs' success, especially without Max Strus, he knows that he's in jeopardy of having his minutes cut because Kenny has been playing him majority of the time at small forward, and when it's not small forward, it's small ball 5. Right? So there's only a few minutes to go around at that particular spot. If we're looking at it and saying that Max Strus is going to be back in the starting lineup and he's going to play the small forward, he's going to be the 3, then the backup 3s are Karis LeVert, Isaac Okoro, Dean Wade. Yeah, you could play Dean as the backup power forward. That's certainly a possibility. But then what happens to George Niang? He's been great for the Cavs at the start of this year. So again, you just get into a math problem. You get into a numbers game. And it's no knock on Dean or anything along those lines, but it's just the position that he plays, the position where he's been used the most. That's the one where there's the biggest logjam. But he was great tonight, and I give him a lot of credit. He has been in the shooting funk for about a month, where he just has not been able to hit anything, and he has busted his ass behind the scenes. He has changed his workout regimen. He has changed some of the shots that he takes before practice, after practice. He's tried to make those more game-like, where they're more off-balanced, where they're more coming on the move, where they're not just like catch and shoot against air, the things that you usually see these NBA players doing just at the end of shoot around. Like he goes through another strenuous workout that follows shoot around, that follows practice. And it's all because he understands just one, how important he is to the team, and two, just how terrible he's been on the offensive end for the last month. Tonight, Ethan, was the third time all year that he's been in double figures scoring. It's like the third time since the beginning of November, basically, the middle of November, where he's made multiple three-pointers in a game. One of them was the other day against Miami when they played before that long break that they went on. But before that, it was like against Detroit or something like that. So, when he makes shots, obviously this is a different team and he's a different player, and it's a lot easier to justify him getting a substantial workload. But if he's not making shots, yeah, he defends. Yeah, he rebounds. Yeah, he brings size to the perimeter and stuff like that. But one-way players or offensive liabilities are going to have a hard time consistently playing for this team, especially given what they want to be offensively, what they want to do offensively. So for him, a really, really good sign that the first night that Max Strus is back and this lineup crunch is about to happen, Dean kind of sent a reminder of, this is the way that I can elevate. This is part of the reason why, I was one of the most impactful and effective players that the Cavs had at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that the defensive end will always be there. And you talked about it, Chris, the 6'9.5", 6'10" Dean Wade with the 6'9.5", as Jared Allen told me at one of his events, coupled with Evan Mobley, the 7-footer, the actual 7-footer. And just all of those different things, like the switchability is different. But Kenny Atkinson mentioned it before the game. We've talked about how Dean Wade has the ability to guard some guards around the NBA because of their size and because of their skill set and all those different things. But Kenny Atkinson admitted that if Damian Lillard was going to play and Isaac Okoro was going to be out, they were going to put Dean Wade on Damian Lillard, right? And then you talk about what Giannis Antetokounmpo and Chris Middleton talked about after the game about how the team, OKC, the team that they just played the other night that was in the NBA Cup final, that currently has the best defensive rating in the NBA, aren't a better defensive team than the Cavs matchup-wise for them, right? When you talk about the size, you talk about the physicality, you talk about the strength, and the switchability of what the Cavs have been able to do. They've been able to stifle some of the best teams in the NBA. I mean, I think the Bucks had won 11 of their previous 13 games coming into today, so they were riding a hot hand, and it didn't matter. And my favorite thing, because of how much we talked about it last year, was that the Cavs put their foot on the opposing team's neck, even if they were up by 30. It takes me back to what Karis LeVert did at the end of the period. I think it was the third quarter, where he had a layup, fell to the ground, got back up, stole the inbound pass, dove on the floor for the ball, tipped it out to Donovan Mitchell, who hit a three-pointer to end the period. And then you talk about George Niang. The team is up by 33 at this point, I believe it was. And he's diving on the floor on the defensive end to get a rebound or a loose ball or whatever it was. And then that leads into another opportunity on the offensive end for the team. And it's just, it shows how important and what the habits that they're trying to create. I know that's a buzzword for Donovan Mitchell, and I used it to kind of get him to talk about it after the game tonight. The habits that they've been trying to implement from the beginning of the season, not because of what it means now, but because of what it'll mean in the playoffs come April, May, and June.
Yeah, this is the time of year that you build your habits so that you have things that you can lean into when you get into the playoffs. You have to have championship habits. You have to do these things on a daily basis. You have to set a standard and you have to live that standard every day, no matter the opponent, no matter if it's 3 games in 4 nights, no matter if it's the second game of a back to back, no matter if it's a grueling time when you're dealing with a very difficult schedule and you're tired and you don't want to practice as hard or you don't want to do the extra stuff after shoot around, whatever the case may be. The Cavs have shown that they are developing championship habits. Obviously, the mark of a championship team is how do you perform in April, May, and June. And the Cavs, they're going to have to show that they're better equipped for that time of year and they're ready to have that level of success. But the things that they're doing behind the scenes, the things that they're doing on a nightly basis, speaks to a championship level organization. It speaks to a championship level team. The sacrifices that they're willing to make for one another, the selflessness that they play with, the way that they share the game, the way that they're connected on the floor. Like all of that stuff, you do that now. You do that during the regular season, and you don't allow that kind of slip up. And for the most part, like the way that they have played, the way that they have conducted themselves is very, very consistent. And that is a very positive sign for ultimately how far they're going to go this year.
And the other positive of what they were able to do on the scoreboard is that nobody in the starting lineup had to play over 27 and a half minutes. So that not only alleviates the pressure that comes with playing a back-to-back, even though it is against the hampered Philadelphia 76ers who will be without Joel Embiid on Saturday, but it's also just the long haul, the wear and tear that comes with playing an 82-game season that can be managed easier if they get out to these leads and allow the other guys to get in and do those other things and get minutes at the end of the game as well. So I think that's a big thing. But Chris, I wanted to talk about something that, one, the main storyline of tonight, which is Max Strus being back. And we talked with Donovan about how he didn't recognize or realize that Max walked into 8 threes tonight in his first game back, trying to kind of get his feet under him and all those other things. And because he was like, it'll come, as he says to almost everybody that might be struggling or whatever when it comes to the season shooting wise. But in his first game back, Max was 3 of 8 from 3-point range, and he was getting them up in succession, right? He was continuing to put them up, whether it was good or bad or ugly, because you need that. And the other thing about Max's game that we saw tonight was that he admitted he was seeking out physicality because that's the way to test out his ankle and to take some hits and to continue to get his ramp up period back to where he needs it to be. Because Kenny Atkinson said before the game that his minute restriction is based on how his ankle and how his body reacts to everything that goes on as he continues to come back to this team, and how quickly that his body can get back to where he's comfortable playing at the minutes that they want him to be at.
Yeah, I just don't think there's any other way to say this other than the way that we've been saying it basically all season long. The Cavs need what Max brings to the table. And it's so hard for people to accept that and understand that because they have the best record in the NBA. because they have one of the best offenses in the NBA, because they're one of 5 teams that are top 10 in both offense and defensive rating. But they need what Max brings to the table. Like, he elevates them to a completely different level. He is tailor made for this system. There's a reason why there has been so much excitement around the return of Max Strus. There's a reason why back in training camp, Kenny Atkinson was basically salivating about the possibility of unleashing Max and creating so much confusion and chaos for the opposing defense. You saw elements of that tonight. Look, it was against Milwaukee. It was only one game. They didn't have Dame. So you never want to take just one statistic and blow it out of proportion and say that like it's going to carry over to the next game, or it's going to be a signal of how this team is going to function the rest of the year. But what it does is it provides a window into why he can be so effective. It provides a window into what the Cavs can become as an offensive force with Max in the lineup playing high minutes. He played 19 minutes tonight, Ethan. Their offensive rating with him on the court was 156.1. That is obnoxious. That is ridiculous. And again, it's just one game. So let's see what it looks like as we continue this process. But it shows you what he's capable of offensively. It shows what the Cavs are capable of with him on the court, and the many, many things that they can tap into offensively, and the many, many different complications that it provides in opposing defense. I mean, are you kidding? 156.1 as an offensive rating with him on the court? Nobody else was within 25 of that. Like, that's the kind of impact that he has. Like, it takes this team to a completely different level to have that amount of cutting, to have that basketball IQ, to have that floor spacing, to have that gravity, to have that continuous movement, to have that three-point threat everywhere he goes. If he's running that two-man game with Evan Mobley, what does the defense do? Both guys go with Evan? One of them switch, and then Max is dealing with, in some cases, a bigger defender that he can take off the dribble, and then all of a sudden the defense is in a rotation. If he's sharing the floor with Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, those guys command so much of the attention from the opposing defense. But Max commands a level of attention from that defense too. So, there's a reason why the Cavs went out and signed him a couple of years ago. There's a reason why he was one of the most effective players that they had on this team last year. And there's a reason why in the first game of the year, there were already signs and elements of just the excitement surrounding this offense and the next level that it can get to. And again, it's hard to say that there's another level that this offense can reach. But guess what? There is another level that this offense can reach thanks to Max Strus.
And you mentioned the two-man game with Evan Mobley, and the one play that in particular that stood out. Obviously, we didn't get a big sample size of him working with Evan, even though he's talked about how excited he's been to see his evolution and all those different things. Was in the third quarter, I believe it was like 50 seconds left, and there was an inverted pick and roll ran with Max and Evan, with Evan displaying his ability as a ball handler, and then switching, and the defenders switched, but it was a double switch onto Evan because of how powerful he had been in the painted area to start the game. And they both trailed him, and then Evan just kicked it back out to Max, who, again, we talked about it with Sam yesterday in yesterday's podcast, might have surprisingly been way more open than he has been, especially when it comes to discussing how he had to play last season, right, in JB Bickerstaff's offense. And when you talk about Max Strus and because we haven't seen him a whole lot this year, obviously, or even in practice, but his quickness to get off the floor for his jumper is so quick. We talk about Sam Merrill's release is quick. Like, the process to getting off the floor. His Max Strus's lift is like split second. You have no chance or no room for error when it comes to making the decision to close out as a defender, and that's part of the reason why he has that much gravity, even if he's not shooting to the percentages that he wants. Also, again, he took 8 threes in his first game back after missing 9 weeks. The volume's going to be there, and most of these
Hmm.
shots are going to be in better rhythm than he has in the past.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I think when you can look at somebody like Max Strus as almost a luxury, um, it is a great place for an organization to be. And I think, for the first 27 games of the year, the Cavs were able to figure out what they had in Isaac Okoro, figure out what they had in Dean Wade, get those guys an opportunity, give more playing time to Sam Merrill, see if he was ready for a bigger opportunity. It was in some ways a blessing that they got those opportunities and that Kenny Atkinson had to work with different lineups and different combinations and different rotations that maybe otherwise he wouldn't have landed on. If Max Strus doesn't hurt his ankle in his workout coming back from a hip injury, um, how much would Kenny be willing to go to Dean Wade in a starting lineup? Right? How much would Isaac Okoro have been given the platform and the freedom to kind of expand his offensive game and build up his confidence and show the kind of impact that he can make for this team at both ends of the floor? So, at one point, it was looked at as a really difficult thing for the Cavs to get through. At least that's how I was looking at it. But other guys stepped up. The Cavs played well, and now he's back. And the way that he's going to be impacted by how this team functions, and the way that this team is going to be impacted by his return, like it's a really, really good place for this organization to be. I mean, Donovan Mitchell said it following the game. He said, the fact that we've gotten to this point that we have gotten to, best record in the NBA, and we haven't had Max but for now 19 total minutes, like it shows how special we are. And this is a special team. And Max is a big part of that. Dean Wade is a big part of that, right? Isaac Okoro is a big part of that. All these different guys have played a part in the Cavs getting to this point where they've got the best record in the NBA. And now it looks like, even with the best record in the NBA, they're ready to take another step forward as an organization. Honestly, Ethan, I don't know how opponents are going to guard this team. I don't. They have so many weapons. They have so much firepower. They have so many guys with versatile skill sets. They have so many multi-positional players. They have so many guys that can pass, dribble, and shoot. They have so many guys that understand and accept their role and can thrive in their role. They can play big. They can play small. They can play inside. They can play outside. They can play fast. They can play slow. Their bench can step up and deliver a win when the starting five doesn't have it. The starting five can be one of the most dominant, if not the most dominant, in the entire NBA. Like, that's what opponents are going to have to deal with on a nightly basis. And it's not going to be easy because there are so many different actions that they run. There are so many different sets that they can go to. There's so much confusion that they create. And like I said, there are just so many weapons within this offense. And basically everybody but Jared Allen can shoot threes. And
And that,
Tristan Thompson, if we want to count him too.
Tristan Thompson's not getting minutes, Chris. We all
Right.
can agree on that. We
Yes.
talk about players having to fight for minutes. Tristan Thompson is not one of them.
Yeah,
Um,
think about like how that threatens a defense. There's one guy in the every night rotation that like literally can't shoot a three.
and
That's it.
he's attempting them. He will attempt a
Probably.
couple, you know, but
Maybe. Possibly.
But yeah, that's a great point. And to counter that, like their defense is getting better. like, and
Yeah.
their defense is now, it was outside of the top 10 when we were earlier on into the season. Now they're ranked 7th in the NBA in defensive rating, right? So you talk about, and we talked about it earlier about what Giannis and Chris Middleton said about this defense, but the ability for the Cavs to switch, the ability for the Cavs to have more pressure at the point of attack this season because the guards are taking more of a challenge when it comes to Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Karis LeVert, Isaac Okoro, Dean Wade, all being at the point of attack. And Kenny Atkinson talked about it in his scheme planning and the schematics and principles that they have is they're not fading on those switches. They're attacking, they're pushing, and making the ball handler react to what's going on. And that sometimes can lead to turnovers and all those different things. But when you talk about a defense that is constantly improving with already having the best offense in the league, it couples to say that this team is very difficult to go up against for any team in the league. And we're starting to get to the point where we're having conversations of competing with Boston in the Eastern Conference, but also looking across the league and saying who in the West is challenging them, and who in the West is the biggest threat to them when, if or when they get to the NBA Finals and those types of things. So the conversations start early, but obviously we're only 29 games into the season. So how far do we go into them? That's decided based on matchup and team and whoever they're playing on every given night. But the Milwaukee Bucks are a team that a lot of a lot of analysts, a lot of national media reporters over the last couple of weeks had said will threaten in the East. So what does that say about the Cavs if they handled them by a 20-point margin again? right?
Yeah, I mean, I think they will threaten in the East, and I think
Yeah.
they're a completely different team when they have Dame. The Dame Giannis pick and roll is devastating for anybody to defend. I was very interested to see how the new look switchy defense of the Cavs was going to deal with the Dame Giannis pick and roll stuff because it has given problems to everybody. And I wanted to see how the Cavs switching was going to hold up against that particular play set. Didn't get an opportunity for that, unfortunately. Maybe the next time that these two teams play, we'll kind of get a feel for how the Cavs are going to deal with that and how they handle that, and whether the switch heavy approach that they take is a way to combat that, or if they would have to go to a different kind of coverage on the defensive end of the floor. But it was clear that Milwaukee was neutralized from the very beginning of this game, like the minute that they landed in Cleveland and knew that they weren't going to have Dame. They don't have another point guard on the entire roster. Like DeLon Wright's a combo guard. I guess he could pass for a point guard. I guess he played 17 minutes. Um, they just don't have anybody to consistently run offense through and get them into sets and all that kind of stuff that you need from a point guard. It just, I don't know how they've built this roster without a backup point guard. It's wild to me to think about that.
This is the point that I'm gonna end the podcast on. Is the Cavs are now applying the same method that opposing teams were using against them last year to them, and executing it to perfection. Like, obviously, if you neutralize Torian Prince and AJ Green, who are in the top 10 in 3-point percentage in the NBA, to one of six combined in a game, that's good. But then you say, okay, Giannis, you can have what you want, even if Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, Dean Wade are going to make things difficult on you. And like we've been saying all year, Chris, however you want to put it, 3 is more than 2, 2 is less than 3. All those different things come into an account. And if the Cavs have, and this is what happened last year when Donovan Mitchell was quote unquote shut down or focused on, and then allowed the rest of the team to kind of figure themselves out. That's what the Cavs are doing to opposing teams this year. They're forcing the star players to have spectacular games and allowing the other role players to play them off the court or play themselves into a loss. And that's what happened tonight. That's what happened against the Denver Nuggets. And it's happened multiple times this season. So to see the growth of this Cavs team into a way in maturation from what was their Achilles heel last year and turning it into a strength shows how much that they've grown and how far that they have potential to go this season.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I just don't know. I don't know how you look at this team and think of them as anything other than a legitimate championship contender. Is the roster perfect? No. There is no perfect roster. There is no such thing as a perfect roster. There's no such thing as a perfect team. Like the dynastic Golden State Warriors that had Steph, Clay, Kevin Durant, and Draymond Green, they don't exist anymore. Like Boston's really, really good. Really good. But like it's a thin bench. What happens if one of their guys gets hurt? If it's Porzingis that gets hurt, it's a completely different looking team. It's a completely different level of opponent that the Cavs would be facing or any other team in the Eastern Conference would be facing. So, like, understanding that, like, Boston exists, and I still don't think there's any team in the NBA that can beat them 4 times in 7 tries if they're fully healthy. It's hard to sit here and look at the Cavs and say, like, you know, they need this or they need this or they're missing this. You know what I mean? Like, you could sit there and you could say, yeah, they could use another wing. Yeah, they could probably get some more size on the perimeter, especially at the wing spot, because you know, they've got a lot of guys that are 6'5". But like, none of that feels as if it's going to be a detriment to them, right? Like, it just feels like they're going to find a way to overcome those flaws or mask those flaws. So I just think, you know, again, there is no perfect roster and any team can improve, especially when you have the trade deadline looming in a couple of months. But this is a really good team. This is a really deep team. This is a really complete team. This is a well-coached team. This is a connected team. And they're going to be a hard out for anybody when you get to April, May, and June, provided that they are healthy.
And with that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. This is where you can get live updates throughout the games, where we give you insider information that we've got throughout the week, throughout the day, directly to your phone. And it's also a community that we've created where you can have direct communication with us to get your voice heard and also to feel like you have a direct contact to guys that are in the locker room with the players and get to know them on a personal level. So to get all these information, sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who signed up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.